Hi, good evening. So today we're going to be following Ellie. We're going to walk in Colossians 1, 9 through 14. So let's just go ahead and start off by reading this passage, okay? And so from the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of His will and all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to Him, bearing fruit in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of God. May you be strengthened with all power, according to His glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption and the forgiveness of sins. All right. So, in high school, I went to a high school, and it's around here. So this is Polk County. This is an extension of the South, kind of a finger that goes in the middle of Florida without the coasts, okay? And in high school, we had this group of kids who called themselves Rednecks and country folk, whatever you want to call it, okay? Now, they would dress and act a certain way so that you pretty much had no option but to recognize them as rednecks. And there are three specific things you did that lets you know that you were redneck, okay? So you listen to country music, definitely, always. And if someone came up with a country song, you knew it, and you knew who the author was, and you knew that Hank Williams was the best. And when you drove some car or vehicle, it was never a car, actually, it was always a truck. And if you had the means, you would always lift the truck and put big tires on it, and then you would go through the mud just for kicks and giggles. Okay? And then finally, you would have this one article of clothing that was just year-round in the hot and the cold, but especially in the cold, and it was your camo jacket. And if you did not wear a camo jacket when it was cold, you were not actually a redneck. This is pretty much how high school works. So if you wanted to be in this clique, it was pretty simple. You put on your camo jacket, you go out and buy like a $2,000 little beater truck, and you listen to country music all the time, and you were part of the crowd. Now the thing is, a lot of these people, they could talk the talk, and they looked like a redneck, let me tell you. But they could not walk the walk. In fact, I know personally, because a lot of my friends were in these cliques, that many of them have never been fishing. Many of them have never been hunting. Many of them had never even taken their truck off-road for the very thing that they lifted it up for. So they could talk the talk, but they couldn't walk the walk. And it was kind of sad to see it, to be honest. Now, there were other people, and I knew these people well too, because these are probably some of my kinfolk, to be honest. But there are other people who, they went fishing all the time, they went hunting all the time, and they had been stuck in so many mud holes they can't even remember the last time it happened. But these people didn't act like that. They wore their camo jackets when they were hunting, and that was it. It's kind of interesting to see the difference between people who want to be identified as redneck and people who just are. All right, so I say all this to say that a lot of the same things happen in Christianity. In fact, like almost the exact same thing happens in Christianity. You see it, you know the music to listen to, you know the things that you're supposed to drive, the clothes you're supposed to wear, just the kind of atmosphere and the language that you're supposed to speak, and you get labeled as a Christian. It's pretty easy. It's not too difficult. But I think that Paul starts to give us a little bit better way to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, because just talking the talk and not walking the walk is not what is sought after by God. Okay? So I'm going to give you 4 ways to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. Okay? The first one is bearing good fruit in every good work. Okay? So we're just going to follow along right through verse 10 all the way down through 14 for the rest of this time. So if you want to know where it's coming from, that's where it is. Okay? So bearing good fruit in every good work. So what does it mean to be fruitful is my first thing. And so just thinking about the image of fruit, fruit is meant to carry the seeds of the plant other places. So it's meant to be like eaten, digested, and sent off, or like fallen, and then like kind of fruit rots and the seed disperses. And so the plant moves and spreads out because of the fruit. So to bear good fruit necessarily involves evangelism. It necessarily involves spreading the plant. And the plant would be Christianity, of course. So like dig into the image a little bit. Fruitfulness also means to feed and sustain others. So we eat fruit, and it's good, and it tastes great, and we can kind of keep moving. And it gives us energy and life and vitality. So without fruit, we would probably eat something else. But assuming fruit was the image for our food, we would starve. We would have no sustenance. So this is interesting because I have a tree in my backyard. Kind of a tree. It's a banana tree. And we got it from my grandmother's house. And my grandmother, she had this great banana tree. It produced so many bananas, just tons of bundles of bananas. And they were all these little tiny bananas. They were probably like 3-4 inches maybe. But they were awesome. And they were just all over the place. You just never had to worry about bananas. She always had some. And she was always just giving them away because she couldn't eat them all herself. Now, so we got this banana tree thinking, oh, great, like we'll get a banana tree, we'll produce bananas forever, and we'll just keep eating bananas, and we'll never have to buy them again, which is awesome because I like bananas. They taste well, they taste good, and you know the whole image of the Mario Kart thing really just I was fixed on it. But the thing is, we got this banana tree and we waited, and you know it takes a little bit for a tree to start fruiting and stuff. So we waited like a year, 2 years. 3 years, 7 years, 8 years. Now I'm 23, and the tree has never produced any fruit. In fact, if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know it was a banana tree. It's just kind of a bush with big leaves, and so it's not a very good tree. In fact, it's not a very good banana tree. You would never know that it's a banana tree. So sometimes in our walk as Christians, if we don't produce fruit, no one will ever know that we are Christians, especially if you're not able to analyze people's personalities. The second way that we're going to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord is we're going to increase in the knowledge of God. So what is knowledge of God and why does it matter? Well, knowledge of God is simply knowing who it is that we're worshiping. And it's knowing a little bit about God's attributes. And it matters because if you don't know who it is you're worshiping, you're not worshiping God. And so to think about this, one of my good friends, he's getting engaged now, so he's got a fiance. It's pretty crazy. Never thought this would happen for him. But he's a great guy, and he talks about this illustration that if he was to come home one day and say, "Oh, Courtney, you know, I love you so much because you just got the most beautiful brown hair and the most beautiful golden brown eyes, and you're just so nice and short, petite, and you are so humble and quiet," she would slap him. And the reason she would slap him is because she is none of those qualities. She is a tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl who is very outspoken, who talks a lot, and is just a life of a party. And so if he came to her and said, "Courtney, I love you for all these reasons," she would slap him because that's not her. So if you don't know the attributes of the person that you are praising, it's not really praise, it's an insult. And so we have to grow in knowledge of God in order to properly worship Him, in order to properly understand who it is that we're worshiping. And now knowledge is not just cerebral. It's not just that we know a lot about who God is. It's also ingrained in this idea that knowledge and action are combined and they move together. And so without action, knowledge is useless and not actually knowledge. Because if we knew who God was, we would worship and we would act accordingly. So this is the idea of knowledge that goes beyond just mere cerebral content. The third thing that we need to do to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord is we need to be strengthened in all power. Now that's significant because when Paul is saying this, he says all power, and that's a lot of power, or that's actually all the power. And how could we possibly achieve all of the power? And it is according to His glorious might, and His being God's. According to God's glorious might, we can be strengthened with all power. Now, that's not something to take lightly, because when we have God's power behind us, we actually have some power. We can actually do these things. Some of these things, knowledge of God is impossible without God's strength moving through us. Now, why do we have this power of God? And it is for all endurance and patience with joy. Because the thing about the Christian walk is that it is not a quick walk or a short walk. It's not a sprint. It's not about who gets there fastest. It's about who does it steadfastly through their life. It's not just about starting well, it's about finishing well. So I know a lot about endurance and perseverance from my time as a runner. So I remember back in track, this is a little bit different than cross country. So track, you have two kinds of athletes. You have an athlete who runs 100 yards and stops, and you have an athlete who runs 2 miles and might just keep going for a cool down for like a 3 mile, just kind of chill day or something. Okay? Now, I'm not like slamming the sprinters, but I do think that endurance running probably is the most biblical sport out there. So if you're wanting to get into biblical sport, it's probably endurance running. But that aside, the sprinters hated long runs. In fact, when the word long run was mentioned, their faces just dropped. And I cannot run long. But the distance runners were like, yes, finally, we can just chill and just take it easy all day long. It's great. And the odd thing is the sprinters couldn't even run that far. They could run like 400 yards. They were pushing it maybe half a mile, maybe even a mile if they were like really on their game that day. But for the most part, they refused or could not run more than a mile or two. And so we have to be strengthened for a distance race, not just a sprint. Finally, the last thing we need to do in order to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord is we need to give thanks to the Father who has qualified us. So the action here is not being qualified. The action is the giving thanks that we do. So our role in this is to give thanks for the qualification that God has given us. So it is a grace thing, not a works thing. And it results in good fruit. Okay? So thanks be to God that we are able to bear good fruit, that we are able to increase in knowledge, and that we have His strength with us. Thanks be to God. Now it's interesting, this word giving thanks, it's in the Greek it sounds a lot like the word Eucharist. And so I think it's actually where we get it from. Eucharistuntes. My pronunciation might be a little off, but it's a participle, and so it's got this idea of one who is giving thanks at this moment. And so how appropriate it is that this giving thanks already points us back to this idea of Christ, this idea of thanking Christ as we remember the work that He has done for us. Because the Father cares about the Son, and so we ought to care about the Son and remember the Son and give thanks for the Son because the Father is doing it as well. He looks at the Son when He sees us. How thankful should we be that God has qualified us through the Son? And this idea of qualification means being qualified for something. And what are we qualified for? We are qualified to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. So we have moved away from the domain of darkness. We are no longer trapped and bound by the restrictions of this world. We have now moved into the kingdom of the beloved Son. We have looked at 4 practical ways in which we can walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. We bear fruit in good works. We increase in knowledge. We're strengthened in His glorious might. And we give thanks for all of this. But we have to remember is that without the last part, without this transference from the domain of darkness into the kingdom of the beloved Son, without the giving thanks for the qualification that has come to us by God, none of the other things are possible. Without God's grace, the redemption and the forgiveness we find in His Son, we have no reason to give thanks. We have no source of strength. We have no knowledge of God, and we can bear no fruit. Thanks be to God that He has delivered us. Let us walk in His kingdom.